In this little clip, I'm just going to briefly go over some key ideas and some key points in this article, Who is Black? One Nation's Definition. And I did talk about that in the social construction or the history of race and racism. I talked about this one drop of blood rule. And while I think the article is very clear in what it's trying to get us to see, I just wanted to touch upon a couple of things. One is this idea of the one drop of blood. And remember how we talked about that part of the social construction of race is a political process involving the government. That the legal system of our government, in its attempt to classify race, began to place legal rulings that allow us to define race in particular ways. And one of the ways they do it is by this one drop of blood. Means that if you have one drop of blood, 1/16 black, you are considered black by the legal system of our society. Whether or not you consider yourself black or whether you relate to being black is not the issue. What the writer here is trying to get us to see is that how you believe or how you see yourself is not important. It's how the government sees yourself and how the government has defined you that determines a lot of how your life how your life is affected in our society. It's important when we see this thing because we see what the issues, the cases of Plessy versus Ferguson and Phipps, this idea that even though these two people did not identify as black, Plessy didn't want to deal with racial segregation and sit at the back of the train because he didn't feel he was black. And Phipps didn't want to sit there and have on a birth certificate being identified as black because she didn't identify as a black person. So we have these mixed race people that were who identified individually as white, but who were classified as black by the U.S. government and its legal system. So it's important to understand how this idea of biology, since race is a social construction, and since social constructions are a series of ideologies, and since ideologies are mythical representations of our relationship to the real world, they had to play something solid. America doesn't do well with ambiguity. It needs a definition. It needs an answer. It needs to reduce race to its very smallest amount. And that is the way we've set it up for the one drop of blood. It's called hypodescent, where racially mixed peoples are always associated with the subordinate group. The next thing, another aspect that I want to talk about this thing is the issue of passing, because I find this part amazing. That they sit there and say that we have people in our society that are biracial, that are white and black, let's say, mixed race, but are able to pass as white. And they bring up an interesting thing that this passing idea, or the ability to pass, is always framed in blacks' ability to pass as whites. We never talk about whites' ability to pass as black. Let me say that again. This ability to pass, we frame it in such a way that we always talk about it in blacks' ability to pass as white, and never talk about it in whites' ability to pass as black. This kind of one drop of blood rule comes into effect. That it's more of a social issue than a biological issue. It plays, like I said before, on the one drop of blood rule. And it's interesting because what their argument in this idea of passing in this one drop of blood rule is that this one drop of blood rule, they argue, only applies to blacks. It doesn't apply to Asians, it doesn't apply to Native Americans, and it doesn't apply to Latinos and Latinas. That blacks inhabit a unique position in the social construction of race is that this one drop of blood, which becomes this political and scientific determination of race, only refers to blacks. Now, I'm not sure if that's true, but it brings up an interesting idea. If that is true, why do we do this? What is it about being black that is so discomforting in America that we will do everything we can to make sure that those people who have one drop of black blood in them are identified as blacks, either by other people or by our government, even if they themselves don't see themselves as black, or even if they can pass as white, they are still considered black. That's a very interesting structure, a very interesting dynamic to this one drop of blood rule.